everybody, Chris Pies here for another classroom with PCA Sim Racing. This week, I think we're entering the fifth week of Series 10, and it will be at Interlagos. We're headed down to Brazil for this one in the GT4, the 718 GT4 car. Interlagos is a really, really interesting track. There should be some great racing at this track. It is a Formula One track, which means lots of tight corners, lots of switchbacks back and forth, and lots of opportunities to set up passes through multiple corner segments. Interlagos has some very tricky corners that, if you're not familiar with, can be a little daunting to start out with. But hopefully through this track walk and classroom, we'll be able to kind of set some of those questions in your minds at ease a little bit and try to figure out together what is actually the best way to take Interlagos in the GT4. But with that being said, let's get started as we normally get started. Are there any questions that you guys have? We're just over, we're actually, I think this marks halfway through the season in Series 10. Any questions or comments that you guys have? How's the season been going? Been going great. Okay, I'll just leave it at that then. So we're jumping into the GT4. So the last race we just had was in the GT3R. So we're going back to the GT4 for this next race. And we've already made this kind of transition once before between the first and the second race this season. And the last time we were in the GT4 was at VIR. Interlagos is very different than VIR, but a lot of the things that you learned at VIR can be transferred over to this to Interlagos. So let me get the replay loaded up, and we will start going and take a look at it. Has anybody raced Interlagos in the GT4 before this? And if so, what do you think about it? Come on, guys, you got to give me something.
I think we raced it in the Cup car. It might have been a few series ago. It's a really, really fun track, but there are some really slow parts where you have to be accurate.
For sure. And if you're looking at my screen, you can see it. I mean, as this is loading up, we can see the track map. It's kind of defined. Interlagos is really defined by this internal section that's in the middle of this track. Which is these right, left, right, really tight corners. Corners where you have to get the car rotated relatively early in a corner. So do everything you can on the braking to get the car rotated, pointed in the right direction before you start to commit to throttle to accelerate out of the corner. But then it's also got some really fast sweepers. Turn 4 particularly is pretty nasty if you're not ready for it. But hopefully I can give you guys some ideas or some at least points of interest that we can take a look at to see as we're driving through it to make you more comfortable with it. So, okay, well, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. So I did some testing here. It looks like the track temp is 83 degrees. I was hovering right around the low 140s when I started getting comfortable with the track. I think there's a 39 that is available here. I think my optimal was actually it was significantly lower, at least for me, than the lap times I was actually running. So I think my optimal was a 39.6 or something like that. So almost about half a second quicker than the times I was actually putting down. But for me here on this particular day, I have not driven the GT4 very much on this track. I've driven this track plenty in other cars, especially like GT3s or GTE cars. But actually, I was shocked when I loaded it up, and every sector that I ran in the sim was showing a purple time because I had never actually run a GT4 at Interlagos. So this was a new experience on that front. But I was impressed because normally I don't really like Interlagos. There's a lot of kind of weird corners that don't seem to set up well for a lot of sports cars, but the GT4 actually felt like it had a pretty decent flow to it, and I was actually really enjoying it. So hopefully you guys get the same kind of pleasure on it. As always, when I'm going through the track walk, if you have any questions whatsoever, just go ahead and pipe up and ask the question, what gear are you in, or something like that. Rather tackle it while we're at the corner rather than later. So I'll do kind of segments. I'll go through the first segment, second and third segment, and ask if there's any questions as well. But we'll try to create bite-sized chunks so we can focus on it. All right, so the straight here at Interlagos is substantial. So the most important corner on this track is the final corner, the final turn. And when I mean the final turn, I mean the final turn that you're actually braking for on the way up the hill. I don't know if the proper track map is actually identifying these last couple of left-handers as corners, but they're flat out in most cars. So I don't really consider them corners. But we'll go over that as we finish the track walk. But coming down the front straight to get our lap started, the thing we need to focus on is trying to set ourselves up for turn one. Turn one, in my opinion, is probably the most difficult corner, or maybe the second most difficult corner on the track. And ironically, even though it's difficult, it's also probably one of the least important corners in terms of taking properly. Turn one is the kind of the definition of a throwaway corner. Turn one's only purpose is to set up for turn two, for us to get on throttle as fast as possible. The whole mentality of the turn 1, 2, 3 complex is to get to throttle as soon as possible after we come out of turn 1 and maintain full throttle all the way through the next two corners, leading on the straightaway, leading to turn 4. If we are finding ourselves in this transition, or in this little segment, going to throttle, coming out of throttle, heaven forbid actually touching the brake, and then going back on throttle, we are losing time. We should, when we commit to throttle, we should be able to get on throttle if our line is good, and commit to it. So what does that mean? That means that this braking zone coming into turn 1, while from a racing perspective is important to nail if you're racing somebody and you're trying to outbrake them. But if you're on your own, or you're just doing qualifying laps or so, the braking zone for turn 1 isn't as important. You can brake earlier and lighter to maintain a stable platform in the car, to help assist you for the entry into turn 1, to set it up in a good spot so you can get to throttle sooner. There's no reason, unless you're, like I said, you're outbraking somebody, that you need to do absolutely last second threshold ABS, oh my god, my hair's on fire, braking going into turn 1, because it's just going to make it really difficult to get the car back into a stable platform to take turn 1 properly and to transition to throttle to go through turn 2 and third 3. So what do I mean by all this? Well, let's see what it shows. So coming into the braking zone here, we've got some really good braking markers here. I was noticing that I was braking before the 50 board, but after the 100 board. The closer to the 50 board that I was getting onto my braking, the more hairy or the more ragged my turn 1 was being in this whole first complex. The earlier I was braking and the softer I was braking, the quicker I was going through the corner. So that may seem a little counterintuitive to most people, but the idea is that if you brake softer and earlier, yeah, you may be starting to scrub your speed sooner, but your rate of deceleration is slower, meaning that even though you're not slamming on the brakes as hard as you can, you're still going to end up, your average speed in the braking zones would be very similar to somebody that's doing absolute threshold braking at the last moment. So for here, I was braking right around here is when I was getting to brake. So it's probably about the 75 board, if there was one. So equidistance between the 150 board. I am using all of the track, so I'm going to start moving the car as close to this wall as I can to set up for the left-hander. The key here, if you do go out here into this runoff area, is you don't want to stay in it too long, because we have grass that eventually shows up here where my mouse cursor is after the flag stand. We don't want to touch that. It's very easy to get into it if you try to over-exaggerate the entry. So we just need to make sure that we are bringing our right side tires right along the grass without touching it, which would really hamper our entry. So as you can see here, it's a nice, easy line along the grass line that we're treating on the entry here. Nice, easy trail braking all the way down the hill. And if you look at this corner, right, I mean, it is on the side of a cliff, frankly. We're going straight to the left, tons of camber on the entry, which means we're going to get a really good turn in because the hill is going to help us turn down. But as soon as we get down to about the apex or down to the curbing, you can actually see less of the track. And what does that mean? Well, that means that the camber that's assisting us in this first part of the track is disappearing and going away from us. So we need to be ready for when we turn in, as we go through the corner, the grip that the track is giving us is going to slowly go away, which means that we're going to start to lose our ability to turn halfway through the corner. So really good entry, really good rotation on the beginning. Use that to our advantage to help rotate the car, but understand that as we go through the corner, that's going to become less and less and less. And if we don't get our rotation done early, we're never going to get it done. So I always feel like I'm getting kind of early down to this curbing, but in reality, it's not. So if we look at the curb in its totality, we're actually apexing it about halfway through. As I'm looking here at the replay, you can see this like green, I guess, astroturf on the inside of the curbing. We're apexing on the back end of this, right, on the way out. And we want to use this curbing as much as we can. We don't want to go over it too much because what happens is the car will become unloaded. And when we go back to throttle, traction control will start to kick in, which will cut the actual throttle coming through the rear tires, which will hamper our launch coming out of the corner. But we want to get up on the curbing and use it to as much of our advantage, both to open the corner and to help us turn. So when we get up on that curbing, the car kind of moves over to the right. It kind of pitches this way, which is helping turn and get that final rotation through the car. As we come, yeah, go ahead.
What gear are you in?
I am in second gear, I believe, at the slowest point, but let's just check real quick. So I go to cockpit, whichever, maybe. There it is. Let's see here. So I'm in third. Yeah, second. So I'm in second right here. I downshifted to second on my way down into the corner. When I get to about here, which is right around the first apex point through the corner, notice how I'm already starting to pick up the throttle, right? By doing that, I'm trying to maintain my speed and keep my min speed up and roll the momentum through as much as possible. And we want to keep the car as far left as we possibly can to set up for the right-hander. So from this point forth, we need to be 100% throttle through the right-hander and the left-hander all the way down the straight. So this second straightaway starts here. And if it's not starting here for you, you're leaving time out on the table. So as you can see, if I back it up, I am coming down into the corner. So I'm braking, trail braking, trail braking, trail braking, trail braking, boom, throttle a little bit, and then boom, when I know I can get on full throttle and commit on full throttle. The right-hander is going to be apex right side tires as close to the grass as we can without getting on the grass. Use all of the curbing. The car is going to understeer all the way out to the left side. But if our line is good, and the only way our line can be good is through turn one, we pinch the corner and set up for turn two. If our line is good, we can keep the throttle absolutely pinned all the way here. Car will end up on this left curbing, and we can take this left curbing all the way around while constantly accelerating all the way down through turn three. If we do it right and we keep our speed and we keep our speed building throughout the corner, the car will end up on this curbing. There's nothing you can do to prevent that unless you lift off the throttle. We will get all the way up on here. If you go any further than this, and I don't know exactly the best where the 1X actually comes in, because it always felt like it came in after the white line, but obviously it's not coming in after the white line with here. But I was noticing that any further than this, basically if your right side tires go over this grading, there's a 1X here, an off track. So that will happen. If you go too far, obviously you've got some grass that will also come into play, and you can get a slowdown if you go way out there. But understand, look at what we see in front of us. Where is the bailout side? If we have any problems through turn 2 and turn 3, car inside that's not giving us enough room, the car starts to get loose and we're trying to fix it, you can always open your hands out and just go way out here into this nice pavement and maintain control of the car without spinning. So if it comes to it, you start to lose control, just open your hands, use the run out, and bring the car on. Take your slowdown, take your 1X, but at least you haven't crashed the car and you haven't wrecked anybody else. So let me back it up because, again, this is probably one of the most complex areas on the track. So braking at the 75 board. First mark is right here at the grass, keeping it along the grass as much as possible. Late apex as late as we can with the AstroTurf as our apex point. Pinch the corner, back on full throttle. Nice wide entry into turn 2. Keeping that throttle pinned all the way around. It'll put us on this left-hand curbing. ride the curbing all the way around, and the car will end up all the way on the right side on track out curbing because that's where it has to go, because that's where the grip is putting us. Something to remember when you're coming through here is the more you turn your wheel, the less acceleration you have. So even if your throttle coming through this left-hander, let's say you didn't get as good a turn in, and you really got to crank the steering wheel over in order to get the car to turn. The more you turn that steering wheel, the less you're going to accelerate, because your throttle and the car is fighting the front tires, which are trying to turn the car, but you're pushing through those front tires. So you're trying to accelerate through a lot of friction, a lot of tire scrub. The straighter your wheel coming through here, the faster your rate of acceleration. So the quicker you're going to accelerate. So just because you can get to full throttle here, if your line isn't right and you're using a lot of steering angle to try to overcome a poor line, what'll end up happening is you won't get the run as somebody else that may have waited a little bit longer to get on throttle to get a better line, because you're scrubbing the front tires so much through that steering angle. Another concept to think about as well is, as I mentioned with traction control, if you are coming through turn 1 and the car is bouncing around because you took too much of this curbing, for instance, and you're seeing purple lights in your dash flash at you, even if you matted that throttle, the car is not going to accelerate, because traction control is preventing the engine from putting the power down, because you have a loss of traction. So what you want to do is you want to kind of bridge or kind of balance that that going to full throttle with what is the grip that is available in the car. Just because you can go and smash the throttle, if there's no grip in the rear tires, the traction control of the car will cut the throttle anyway, despite you being full throttle. So you may think to yourself, or you may even look at your telemetry, frankly, and say, man, I'm going to full throttle at this point, but I can't seem to get the run as some other people that are not going full throttle through here. Well, the reason probably is because you're going to throttle with the car too unsettled. And even though you're full throttle, the car's not giving you full throttle because it doesn't have the traction, and traction control's interfering. So you want to balance this with go to full throttle when you know you have the grip, that the car is not going to cut the traction or enter into traction control state, so you can get that acceleration and actually put the power down to the ground. All right, coming down to turn 4, which on its own is probably, in my opinion, always has been like one of the most tricky corners in iRacing for me. If you look at it from way up above, and maybe we'll do that, I'll change the camera. It's a bit of a decreasing radius corner. So it looks like it's almost like a nice easy left-hander with, a lot of speed that you can take into it. But what ends up happening is, as you crest over from the apex point, the track kind of falls away from you, and the corner seems to be tighter. Always seems to be tighter than you really think it is when you go into entry. It's kind of remarkable in that sense. Couple that with the fact that the 1X is really easy to get on the exit, and you have a corner that is just built to give you off tracks if you try to overcook it too much. So we need to be really disciplined with our markers, our visual cues, to ensure that we're hitting it the right way every time, and we're hitting it in a way that will not cause us to get the 1X every single time we roll through here. It's a very, very late first apex to this corner. So the way I've been taking it is I've been looking at this wonderful flag station that's here with the 100 board, and that is my brake marker. So we're going all the way down to it, and then boom, as soon as we hit the flag station, as it's passing our view from the cockpit, we're starting to enter onto throttle. And it is a pretty heavy throttle. It's basically threshold braking, because we need to slow this car down so we can take this corner. The first initial entry into the corner, the track is relatively flat. So unlike turn 1, which is the last time we've took that almost looks very similar to this. Unlike turn 1, which has a lot of camber in the track, this one has a lot less. So the car is not wanting to turn as well as it did in turn 1. And I think that's one of the reasons it makes this corner so difficult is we just did something very similar in turn 1. The car responded really well to all that camber. We've got a very similar visual in terms of a left-hander for turn 4. But all of a sudden, there's not nearly as much camber. So it just feels like the car just pushes and understeers out of here. And it's the same with almost any car. So the goal is we need to get this thing turned in and rotated early but we need a late apex. And our apex point and what I've been looking for is this service road that's right here. So you can see how far around the corner the service road is. My goal is to get this car rotated and basically apexing or driving along the curb along the service road. And if I do that, if my car is on the curbing parallel with that service road as I'm going through, I can mash the throttle really early and ride the corner through and not worry about getting a 1X on the exit. So as you can see here, I've turned in. There's the rotation. You can see the car actually took a little bit more rotation. I know that I'm going to be on the curbing parallel to this little service road, so I'm already committed to full throttle. And by doing that, the car ends up where it ends up, which is right here, which is perfect. Any further where you get these left side tires like just over this white line gives you the 1X. So that's how close it is to getting a 1X.
Chris, you didn't take much curb there on 4. Should you take more?
Oh, right here on the inside. You can take more, but one of the things that I was finding is that, like turn 1, if you take too much of curbing that's here, the car tends to bounce around and get a little bit unsettled. And I was finding that the car was bouncing to the right. So as you're going through the corner, you get the left side tires up on the curbing, the car becomes unsettled. You have to delay getting on throttle as a result. And it tends to bounce you out anyway to the right. So any advantage that you get off of it may not be worth it. Try it. You may be comfortable and more comfortable with it than I was getting. But for me, I was finding that just getting right around here was nice to where I could absolutely commit to throttle without worrying about the car bounce around. And look where I'm getting to full throttle. Right there. Boom. So I'm actually full throttle before the service road and drive what I call driving through the corner at this point, right? I've already got the rotation done. I know my car is going to be parallel to the service road when I get up to it right on the curbing. That's my apex basically. When I know the car is going to drive over that point, boom, I can get on full throttle and drive through the corner like that.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Any question between the turn 1, 2, 3, or 4, or any of those complexes before we tackle the middle technical section of this track? Okay. Hearing none. We'll continue. So turn 5 here, relatively simple. It's 100% throttle. The car is not stressed. I like to just try to maximize my line through here. I'm treating it like a corner, so I am apexing it super late on the curbing. So basically right where the grass point meets, I'm trying to make the corner as short as possible. So the shortest distance traveled by keeping it nice and tight on the inside. But at the same time, I'm letting the car run out on exit. And the reason I do that is like what we discussed in turn 1, or in turn 3. The more you have the steering turned when you're under full acceleration, the less rate of acceleration you actually have. The straighter your wheel, the faster you will accelerate when at any point, because you have less friction, less scrub through those front wheels. So by unwinding my hands and using all of the track and letting the car run, even though it doesn't need to, the car won't put itself there. If it can turn tighter is what I'm trying to say. There's enough traction to keep the turn nice and tight. You're ending up accelerating slower as a result because you have so much scrub in the front tires. So I am releasing that friction, releasing that scrub from the front tires, and letting the car track out as wide as possible to try to accelerate as fast as possible. Coming up into turns 6 and 7, there's a lot of lines through these two corners. The goal, in my opinion, is turn 7 is the important one, and that's the one that I want to apex. You can do multiple things. You can double apex these two corners. You can displace the first apex and focus on the second apex. Or you could just drive it in really, really hard on the first apex, and then kind of gather it up in the middle and then kind of just end up where you end up through the second apex and not worry about it. I tend to prefer focusing on that second apex, and I don't care about this first apex. So what that ends up looking like for me is I tend to displace this apex a little bit. Now, while it looks like I'm getting down to it in this lap, I actually did a pretty good job of apexing it here. But there's on other laps that I've been out here, another car width out to the outside. The whole goal is basically treat it like one big corner where the apex is turn 7 and turn 6 isn't part of the corner, is the way I think of it. So we're driving it in pretty deep. I'll get on the brake on the way up the hill. There's not a whole lot of brake marks, as you can see. You have a flag stand that's over here that maybe you can use as a reference for a brake marker. But what I'm really looking at is I'm looking at over here through the apex. And basically, as that visual comes up, I know what that looks like in my brain, of where I want to start braking the car and what the car feels like in terms of speed and how the whole corner is coming at me. So I'm braking by feel through here. So a little bit of brake. It's not a very heavy brake. It's just enough to, as we brake, we both slow the car down and we get the weight on the nose to help us turn in. The car wants to understeer through here, especially after the apex. So there's a lot of coasting, or even a little bit of trail braking, depending on how fast you went through the first or through turn 6. But if you have to coast through here, that's okay. The goal is we're trying to get this car rotated as much as we can so we can hammer on that throttle. As you can see here, I've picked up 100% throttle through here because I know the car is taking a set and I can drive through the second corner. So as you can see...
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
It's Joachim. If you go back a little bit before the first turn, it's very hard to see because the screen is blurry, but there's a black tire mark, very pronounced on the track, that is permanently there.
Right here, I think, is where...
Yeah, that can be used as somewhat of a reference for a brake marker.
Yeah, I like that, actually. That's a really good one. It's a good, drive over the tire track. I think it's right here, as a reference point for a brake marker, and you're looking downhill or looking forward. So you can use that as well. So quick, in real life, we don't want to use anything that can move, right? But in a sim, it's part of the texture for the track right here, and it's never going anywhere. So you can definitely use that one. Just make sure you're using the right one and you're not using somebody else's tire track that was laid earlier because they spun here or something. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, very true.
But that's a good mark. That's a good mark. I appreciate that. Probably somebody can use that too. So again, once you turn in, it's a very light brake. We're just controlling the rotation of the car. We're trying to get the car rotated. And then when we know that the car is taking a set, boom, 100% throttle really early and accelerate through the second corner. And when I mean accelerate through it, we're riding this for better or worse, because ultimately we want to end up right here on the outside to set up for turn 8. That's our first of our really tight corners. So whatever you can do to get the car here is the ultimate goal. And so that sets up and that starts, frankly, we're starting that back here. So nice wide entry. Once we know we're going to make it, boom, 100% throttle. We've done our rotation and we end up right here parallel with the track, just on the curbing, and doing our braking for this right-hander coming through here.
How far left until you want exit?
You probably don't want to go much further than this. I think it's probably similar to getting like the middle of the car on the grading.
Sorry.
You don't want to go any further than that. So I try around this track to keep my right side tires relatively close to the white line. But understand that a lot of places, unlike other tracks, which is annoying, you can go over the white line and open up corners that way. The final corner is a very good example, and I'll point that out as well. So curbs seem to be okay for the middle of your car. Getting the middle of your car over the curb, over the edge of the curb, like on the grading, like I said, that's where the 1X's tend to come.
Come on, dude.
So, all right, coming down into turn 8, really, really tight right-hander, really slow. So second gear corner. We're going to take all of the curbing that we can on the apex, and we're going to apex as late as we possibly can and kind of ride the curbing around for a little bit in order to set up for turn 9. So as you can see here, almost a complete right angle. I'm using all of the curbing, even touching this little trellis type curbing on the inside here with my tires. I'm all the way inside the white line. This is not a 1X. I wouldn't want to go any further with it to risk getting a 1X, but this is not a 1X right here. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to open the corner as much and cut it as much as possible, with the goal of putting the car about mid-track to set up for turn 9 right here. Turn 8 doesn't matter, frankly. It's only to set up for turn 9 because there's no meaningful acceleration beyond turn 8 into turn 9. It's kind of just a dab of the throttle, then you're back off and braking again. So all we need to focus on is getting the car in a good position for turn 9. However you want to basically do that, you can do it. So do what you can to see what you can do to get it in a good spot. Yeah, go ahead.
I can get way over on that grass without getting a 1X.
Yeah, so I think where the 1X is basically, you can see there's two different textures here. There's the trellis curbing, which acts like track, and then there's grass, which is ice. I think you can get all the way up and basically get your right side tires pretty close to this grass without getting a 1X. I don't tend to try to do that. I try to do it right here because I don't want to mistake too much and get that 1X. So this trellis is basically right side tires touching the trellis. I'm happy with that. Again, going through here and cutting it even more, can you do it? You can experiment with it. But the last thing you want to do is be picking up easy 1Xs through here if you can prevent it. So.
Right.
Hey, Chris, I've got a rules question for this whole section related to what's on and off track here.
Yeah.
So I'm in another league that defines the racing surface is strictly between the white lines. They don't count curbs and stuff. So I'm just curious because I've seen and experienced a lot of close racing in this section, a lot of side by side. If you choose to put your car outside the white line here or any of the other curbs, and another car is inside you, what are the rules within PCA in terms of what room you need to leave if you're the car alongside, particularly the one that's technically on the racing surface inside the white line?
So from my understanding, and somebody from the steering committee or something like that can weigh in and contradict me, please, if it's the case. But effectively, the only rule that we have is on like rovals. If you go down on the apron, there's no expectation that the car that's on the apron has any right of way to come back up on the track, right? They can't come out and drive into somebody. And if somebody's on the racing surface, they don't have to allow room for the guy that has left the racing surface on a roval and is down on the apron. So think Daytona on the tri-oval area. Somebody goes down, gets on the apron to try to make it as short a distance as possible. Coming up to turn 1, they need to get back up on the racing surface. The car that's to the right of them doesn't have to let them up if they don't want to. When it comes to here, so in our league, if you're not getting a 1X, it's racing surface. There's no rule that I understand that dictates what is racing surface or what is not racing surface. It's using iRacing's penalty system or incident system to kind of regulate that. Therefore, it could also follow that if you're not getting a 1X you're on a certain part of the track, that is part of the racing surface, and therefore it needs to be treated as such. So if there is another car that is to my right here, for instance, coming into this braking zone, they can come all the way and treat, if this is racing surface, this white line could effectively be over here, and we can treat it as such. This car that is over here that is not in a 1X area is all of a sudden not treated as like inferior because it is on the other side of the white line. It is treated as though it's still in the racing surface because it does not have a 1X. So I don't think there's a specific rule in PCA that says one way or the other. Good practice in general, though, is that if you're racing somebody to the extent of, well, he left the racing surface because he went over the white line here, meaning that I can stay all the way over here and pinch him to the outside. What you're risking is contact when he goes to turn in to this corner. And at the end of the day, even if the car that's on the racing surface, air quotes, is 100% in the right, if contact happens and you both spin out and end up in the tire barrier and you have a wrecked race car, even if you're right, you're still in the pit lane. So give each other racing room, be respectable with each other, understand that if there is a car that's over here, this is technically the racing line for this track. And so it's going to be treated as such. If you go inside of here and you stay over here, you're actually compromising your speed through this corner. And if you were racing on your own, you wouldn't be there, for instance. You'd be all the way out here. So treat that as such and treat that as the racing line. Yeah, just be sure not to try to conflate some other leagues that may say that. And other leagues do that. They say that you go over the white line, we're going to nick you or we're going to keep an eye on it. You can only do it so many times before you get a penalty. We don't have that in PCA racing. So as long as you're not getting 1Xs, you're free to drive on that part of the track. Did I answer your question, Chad?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
I was just trying to, I mean, I've seen a lot of people go 2 and 3 wide in here. So there's probably a second question related to racecraft, which is how smart is it to try and pass people in some of these corners? Because I've seen quite a lot of it end in tears.
Yeah. Well, we'll cover that here in a second. Once we get through the track walk, we'll talk about passing opportunities through here. But no, it's a great question in terms of, you know, you got to leave room to your fellow competitors. Race them as you would want them to race you. And so if the positions were reversed and they were attacking you and you were defending, you would want them to give you room. So make sure you give them room. Golden rule and all that. So, but anyway, going back to here. So through turn 8, we want to keep it as wide as possible. It is, like I said, a throwaway corner. It's just setting up for turn 9. We want to roll our momentum as much as possible, because the less we decelerate and the less we slow down, the less we have to accelerate to make that time up. So we want to roll the speed off the brakes as soon as possible, roll the grip through the corner, give all of our grip currency to the tires so we can turn. We don't want it to be spent on decelerating or accelerating to the corner. We want it to be turning. As we come through here, it's just a little dab of the throttle before we need to get back on a little bit of brake. It's very few brakes. Sorry, somebody's got a hot mic, so if somebody sees that, can you mute them? I appreciate it. So when you come through here, it's just a dab of the throttle, and then back on the brakes. And when I get on the brakes, it is very light. The only purpose of getting on the brakes is to move the transition of the weight to the front tires so we can get a bite in the front tires and get the car to tuck into the corner. That's it. Other than that, the act of turning this car is going to actually slow it down through this corner to an ample speed that we can take the corner. So the goal here is kind of a wide entry, as you can see here, constantly decelerating or constantly decreasing the radius of the corner. So the car is going to be tucking in to the curbing more and more and more as we go through it, with the goal of a relatively late apex. If you look at the corner itself, if you take a step back and you kind of really look at it, what ends up happening with this particular corner is it goes downhill initially and then it kind of bowls in. So it'll go downhill. We won't have a whole lot of grip on the entry into this corner. We have some camber. We can see a lot of the track, but gravity is going against us. However, when the track starts to slowly not go downhill as much, it starts to level out, that camber in the corner really comes to us and the car is going to grip up about halfway through the corner. And you'll actually feel the front of the car tuck in tighter despite you not really doing too much with the pedals or your steering wheel. Once it tucks in and really takes that bite and kind of darts down to the curbing, that's when we can get back on throttle and get back on throttle aggressively to accelerate coming out of the corner. That's kind of your signifier. So as we tuck in, waiting, and then the car really tucks in right here, really grips in, and we get on throttle. And if we do it right, we'll end up all the way on the curbing, all the way here on the right side. So one more time. Coming through here, a little bit of throttle, off the throttle, just a touch of brakes to get the front end to kind of tuck in. We're kind of using that brake, and then as soon as the car starts to tuck in, boom, full throttle, ride it all the way through, and we can get a good run coming out of that corner. So if that was turn 7, 8, 9, then we're coming up to turn 10 with the tree that we've got in front of us. The tree is a fantastic visual here for this corner. So what I'm doing when I come out of turn 9 and coming up into 10, I'm looking at this tree and I'm pointing my car at the tree basically on my run up here. And then my brake marker is after this curbing where the grass starts and where the tree is kind of like I'm losing the visual of my tree out of my peripheral vision. Trying to get the car parallel to this line as best as possible. And much like turn 8, which was the tight turn before, this feels very similar. We're going to keep it nice and wide, get the car rotated really early on the corner, tuck it down, use all of the curbing, get off the brakes to roll the speed through the corner, And then as soon as we're basically on the curbing and we know that the car has taken its rotation and is in a good spot, we want to add throttle and feed on throttle to get a good run coming out of the corner. We don't want to run too wide here because we're going to have to move the car over to the right just a touch to set up for the very fast sweeping left-hander. Also, this 1X can come up very, very quickly. It seems way too quickly. If you put 2 tires over here, you end up getting a 1X. But it's not fast using all of this run out. We want to kind of pinch the corner off a little bit, not to the same extent as turn 8, but a little bit. So we can end up getting the car over just a touch for this left-hander. And if we do it right, even with hot tires, even with fired up tires and worn tires, we should be able to take this flat out. And again, it all comes down to line. So we want to take and treat this like an apex. We're going downhill. The car is wanting to wash out. The front end of the car is trying to wash out and understeer out away from us. But if we have a good line and we do a nice late apex on that corner, we can be 100% throttle all the way through here. And then we come up to the final corner. And the final corner is one of those places where we can use all of the run out here and get over the white line. I was noticing that if you do it too early like this, and I think I actually might have... No, I didn't pick up a 1X here. But if you come out too early on this curbing, you will get a 1X. So what I was trying to do in later laps was basically get over here and try to keep my left side tires close to the white line and basically drive on this green area. And this green area effectively is the braking zone. So as we come down, we cross over into the green area and then boom, we start braking in a straight line. And then it's like the inverse of turn 8 and turn 10. We're going uphill and we're going to the left instead of going downhill to the right. So we're going to try to get this car rotated as much as we can early with the setup that we're given, which means trail brake pretty severely to get the front end to rotate. And then once the front end rotates, we can get on the throttle aggressively to get the differential to really dig into the ground and give us a little bit more rotation through the corner. We want to apex on this curbing as much as we can. Note that if you take a lot of curbing here, the car will start to bounce around, and under full throttle, it can get a little loose or can get a little uneasy. So experiment with how much curbing you want to take through there. I'm in 3rd gear through here. It seemed like every single time I'd go down to 2nd gear, I would be a little slow. And 2nd gear was like for a millisecond, and then I'd be back into 3rd gear. So 3rd gear always feels like it's bogging down here, but I still think it's faster than 2nd gear, because I think to get into 2nd gear reliably, you have to overslow the car through this corner. And then the car ends up where it ends up. We don't want to go way out here onto the curbing if we can avoid it. That's just additional distance traveled without any real benefit. In addition, if we get out on this curbing, once we cross over that white line, the track just falls away from us. And so if we get out on it, we need to have the car like pretty much at the end of its track out point. If we're still turning and we get up on this curbing, all of a sudden the grip will just be completely gone, and we have a pretty darn good chance of dipping our right side tires in this grass. And if we do that, then we're in the wall out here on the right. There's no saving it. So I like to keep it nice and tidy, keep it nice and tight coming through the final corner, making sure that when we go to full throttle, we'll make it just fine. And then the last bit of the corner or the track is the straightaway. It's left-handers, and they're not insignificant left-handers. If you're kind of caught napping, you can find yourself running out of track on the right side, especially coming through here. So just make sure you stay focused through here. You treat them like corners, you apex them, but they're 100% flat out. Keep them nice and tight to minimize the distance traveled, while at the same time balancing the whole scrub idea. We don't want to be steering a ton into these corners. That will affect our acceleration. So we want to balance the distance traveled with the scrub. Use all of the pit lane entry as your next one. So we want to apex basically at the wall. It's the fastest way through here. And then when we come through it, nice straight line pointing at where the brake zone for turn 1 would be. So we're trying to basically create as straight a line as possible without any scrub, or minimize our scrub through here. Any questions through the middle section and that last section of Interlagos?
I have one that I can mention.
Yeah.
If you rewind your car a little bit to that corner right there. So We've had this happen in other races where people went in to go do a pit, and the racing line is right through the pit lane entrance. Don't be surprised if somebody near the pit window slams on the brakes to go into the pits. So keep in mind about halfway through, people could be diving in right there, and they have every right to get on the brakes and do that. So just keep aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Other people that you're racing against may not be here in this track walk, and so they may say, I'm going down pit lane, and they're just going to trundle down pit lane. I mean, you can, where my marker is, or right here, so here's pit lane, you can brake like when the hill is, when you're going up into the hill into pit lane, so like this close to the cones, and be totally safe. So realistically, if you're attacking the cone, you shouldn't be braking until you're way deep into pit lane. But not everybody is reasonable. Not everybody's practiced pit lane entries. And so you need to also take account the least common denominator, which may be somebody that says, I'm going to trundle into pit lane and start getting out of the gas right here. Or for some reason, they think this is pit lane speed cone where this black, tire barrier is, and they start braking for this, for instance. You don't want to run up into the back of them. So just be aware that that can happen.
Bingo. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. Any other questions?
Yeah, the race control will consider the car at fault if there's impact is the one who runs into the car that slows for the pits. It won't be looked at as a brake check. So
Correct.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. How about tire wear?
So tire wear. So on GT4s, the tires are like rocks. They don't wear very much. So there's this track will eat tires, especially with a lot of the really high load corners. So I'm just gonna do this while we're chatting about this. So with tire wear, so turn 3 where you're 100% on throttle and you're using every bit of the grip to go around those big sweepers, that's just scrubbing tire. When you're going through the second to last corner, that big left-hander that's going downhill, that's just scrubbing your right side tires. So if there is going to be a side of the car that is getting a lot of tire wear, it's going to be the right side on this track. That being said, though, an hour in the GT4 is no problem for tires. And so if you want to take tires, they're free on the pit stop. Or I think 3 tires are free, but do the testing to see. But like for me, if I was doing this race, I probably don't want to take tires because I like the warm tires when I come out of pit lane. I don't like to have to try to drive a couple of laps on half warm and half cold tires. So
are GT4 tire change simultaneous? I thought they were sequential with fuel.
They're simultaneous. GT3 and GT4s are simultaneous. They switched that recently. I want to say within the past few months. Test it just to make sure, because now I'm doubting myself, but I'm almost positive, because I remember when we were doing the sprint or the zone group championship, we were taking like 1 or 2 tires every stop, because we can only put like 6 gallons in the car, so we would take like 2 tires every time because it was concurrent. So
I think it's just the 992 that you don't.
Yeah, the cup car is different. The cup car is not concurrent. It's separate.
Chris, where do you see the preferred passing zones?
Yes. Okay. So let's talk about preferred. Well, one more thing real quick before I do the passing zones. So let's do a quick run through the lap. Just make sure this is the right lap. Without me stopping it so you can see what it looks like at speed. So coming into turn 1 and brake at the 75 board. Late turn in. We're going to really late pinch the corner, back on full throttle, 3rd gear. Constantly opening our hands to minimize the scrub of the tires. Use all the curving on track out. We're looking for the flag stand at the 100 board. That's going to be our brake marker. It's going to be threshold braking. Brake. Start looking for the road. There it is. Parallel. Boom. Full throttle. Let the car go where it needs to go. Again, managing that front tire scrub by opening our hands so we can accelerate. Brake visually. That's the point that I was going to make here. So, and I know I said I wasn't going to stop it, but I'm going to stop it here. When I brake for this corner, so here's the little rubber piece that Joachim was mentioning. You can see right here. What I'm actually looking for, though, is I'm looking over here, and as I crest this hill, so you can see, you can't see the apex curbing. When I see the apex curbing, boom, that's when I start braking. So that's my visual cue coming through here. When I see apex curbing, or I see the track basically, that's when I brake. So let's see how accurate I am to that. So boom, there's the apex curbing. Yep, I've started to pick up the brake. So that's my cue, the visual cue. See apex curbing, I brake. Okay, so let me back it up. And
I guess it depends on your ride height.
Yeah, where you're sitting in the car for sure. But if you're in the static ride height, I think I'm at 100% static. Let's see here. Yeah.
Or you can adjust your horizon too.
Yeah, there's a couple of little factors in there, but that's just an example of you can, if so long as your ride height and your visual cue is consistent, then you can use that as a method. You can use visual cues when they pop up in your vision as brake markers because they will only happen when you hit that certain point.
That's true.
So that's the point of it. It may not be that. You may not be able to use that for you. It may not be comfortable for you. But that's what I use. So anyway, I see it. I brake, turn in, back on full throttle when I know I'm going to make the second apex. Car runs out, brake, get the car rotated early, cut a lot of the corner, dab a throttle, back off it, touch a brake, car tucks in here, boom, full throttle as soon as it tucks in. Looking for the tree right in front. There it is. Brake when I'm parallel to it. Late apex. Off the brake. Roll the speed through. Back on throttle. Get a good line through here. Nice wide coming in. 100% throttle all the way through fourth. Move over. Brake in the green area. Late turn in. Rotation. Third gear. Back on throttle. And ride it all the way up the top. Apex these corners as though they were corners that really mattered, because they are the shortest distance, so we're trying to treat it as such, and then draw a straight line to the brake zone for turn 1. And that's a lap of Interlagos. Really not a long track, but there's a lot going on, so we have to be aware of that. All right, passing zones. So let's talk about passing zones. Now, I don't have any other cars on here, which is unfortunate, but I can at least talk us through it a little bit. Turn 1 is a fantastic passing zone. Lot of good opportunities and different lines coming into here. Experiment with different lines on entry. So if you were going to defend and you were going to brake over here, do it and practice it without your first time doing it being in the race setting and actually defending. Realize where you have to brake in order to still make the corner. Realize what everything looks like and how you can still go through it quickly. But this is a great passing zone because you just had this really long straightaway to draft up on somebody. Let's say you got a really good run out of the final corner, so you could easily have 5 miles an hour on your opponent coming into the braking zone here, and then it's kind of a bit of a game of chicken of who wants to blink first to get a pass done. If you are the car that is being attacked but you don't defend and somebody's on your inside, you can easily force them to threshold brake and try to outbrake you, and if they do that, they're going to sail through the first part of this corner, and you can easily undercut them through the apex of turn 1 by taking a later apex than them. So they will go flying through. They will turn in eventually at some point, but you just come in on the inside of them, and then you have a really good line, and you have a good line all the way through turn 2 and turn 3. So you're basically backing the corner up is what they call it. So you're basically delaying your turn-in point so you can get on throttle sooner and get a better run. So if that's the case, it would look something like we'd brake over way out here. The inside car would be trying to outbrake us on the inside. We would just delay our turn-ins until they're past us, and their speed would probably take them somewhere out here about mid-track because physically can't make the corner. And so they're basically stopping the car somewhere out here and parking it to try to get the car to turn down. But once they do that, you've already started bleeding off the brakes. You're finishing your child brake, so you're actually slowing down at a slower rate. And in some cases, you may even be accelerating down the hill. And if that's the case, then you're just going to blow by them. That's the over-under, basically. So it's really easy to over-under into turn 1. But it's still a great opportunity to pass. If you are the attacker and you park it here and you brake alongside the defending car, So imagine there's a car right here, and you guys are slowing down at the exact same rate. He can't. The outside car can't turn into you, right? He has to give you room. So it's very, very easy for the attacking car to basically park the car here and just basically keep a nice wide line by leaving room for the car on the outside. But don't jump the gun and turn in too early and leave yourself in a compromised situation coming through the corner. Just delay your turn in a little bit more. He can't turn into you. He's got to respect you. And if your car is just sitting right here, it's going to delay his turn in point even more and more and more. And then you can take the corner normally. I would not do that kind of method if you are not alongside him. So let's say you have a bumper on his rear wheel. Don't try to keep him out to the outside like that, because he may not realize you're there, and he may turn down because he sees no one next to him, and then you've pit maneuvered him, and you're probably going to get a penalty as a result. So just keep that in mind. You want to be alongside your opponent before you start like forcing him on a certain line, so he knows where you are and where you're not. This corner, I would say, is not a turn in and not a passing point. The reason being that if you go too wide through this corner, both cars are going to be severely compromised. You're going to have to get out of the throttle, whether you're the inside car or the outside car. You're going to have to get out of the throttle to make the next corner work. And everybody else that is not side by side through here is going to be 100% throttle. And so you're probably easily losing a second to the field if you take this next corner too wide. So swallow your pride. If you're the car that is on the outside trying to go through here, I would say just give a little bit of a crack of the throttle, let the inside car go ahead and go, and then tuck in behind them and get a really good line coming through here. Odds are the inside car, if they're not giving it up through here, is going to have a really poor line for the left-hander. They're going to end up too far on the left because they turned in too early for this corner, which means they're going to have to get out of the throttle somewhere around this carousel coming up, which means that you can just get a good run coming through them and draft them on the back straight and get the pass done before turn 4. Kind of like what I did there. So you see right here, I turned in a little too early, and look where the car ended up right here. This is terrible because the left side tires are going to get into the grass. Car is going to get stupid unstable, and then I'm in a really bad spot coming through here. 1x as a result. And that was all predicated by the run through turn 1. Turn 4 is a great opportunity to pass, because if you get a really good run coming out through turn 2 and 3, and the car in front of you did not, you get a nice draft off of them. You can easily get alongside, and in some cases even buy a car in front of you before you even get to the break point of turn 4. Be aware though, if you are braking offline here, you need to slow the car even more than you normally would, than if you would, like severely. And the tendency is to turn in early and run really, really wide. So it's really important that if you are going to try to pass somebody here and you're on the inside, and let's say you guys are both together, that you basically match your car to the defending car's speed. So again, like turn 1, they can't turn down into you. You're delaying them turning down, and you're at the same time overslowing your car so you can actually make the corner, which in turn forces them to overslow so for them to make the corner. So you're delaying them from taking the racing line through there. Another quick comment coming down here. If you got to run on somebody, fantastic. This is pit lane or pit exit right here, over here on the left. This blue cone is where anybody coming out of pit lane has to cross over. They can't cross over this line. So your track as a car on the racing surface is barely wider than 2 cars. So if you're coming through here, you get a fantastic run on somebody, and there's somebody coming out of pit lane, or there's a car up here, let's say, they have every right to be over here on this side of the blend line. You cannot cross the blend line and run into them. You can cross the blend line if it's clear and it's safe to do so as a car on the racing surface, but the cars coming out of pit lane do not have to yield to the cars that are already on the racing surface so long as they're inside the blend line. So a smart car, a defender, if they get a bad run, will just park the car right here in the middle and say, okay, pass me. Because there's not a whole lot of room, especially if there's a car coming out of pit lane. So keep that in mind. Just be aware. Look way down ahead. Don't just look at the car in front of you in case somebody's slow coming out of pit lane. I would say you have an opportunity to pass here, but it's risky because the cars are so on edge coming into here There's lots of lines, but frankly, if you sacrifice your line coming into the first corner to try to dive bomb someone, they're going to end up having to run wide, but they can still hold it, which means that you're probably going to be too wide going through the second apex as well, which makes it very difficult to keep up your speed coming through this complex. I don't really like going too wide through here just because the cars are so on edge. So there's really only one line. You're using all of the track. Do what you can. This is a potential passing point by somebody, as we were talking earlier, sending it up the inside here and trying to outbreak their opponent. But like all these other corners, you know, if somebody really dives down on the inside, they're going to run wide and be very slow at the apex in order to make the corner. And I just pressed the button, so I didn't mean that. They're going to be very, very slow coming through the corner. And unless they absolutely just park it right here on the apex, you're going to easily be able to over-under them if they outbreak themselves. So keep that in mind. If they don't and they just park it on the inside, you can easily take this too wide and displace the apex. You will be over here as the defending car. They're the outside car, but you're in position 1A for taking the inside around the carousel coming down the hill. So you can ride the too wide through this section relatively easily without losing time to the field because it's such a slow section anyway. And usually the car that's on the inside here at the carousel is going to be the prevailing car that's going to get the position. Same thing with turn 10. Again, you can try to dive it down on the inside as an attacking car, but understand that if you do that, you're going to be very, very slow on the apex. The tendency for the attacking car is to blow through the corner and just miss the corner altogether and have to basically stop to turn the car, which leaves them very susceptible to an over-under through here. The good attackers will basically slow the car down at the same rate as the outside car and park their car on the inside, meaning that the outside car has to go the long way around, which is very difficult to do around this corner.
Well, Chris, I have a hard time getting through turn 9 without taking a lot of the curb.
Right here.
And I noticed that's not your line. Like if I go where you are, I'll end up in the grass.
Yeah, so
I'm probably going too fast, right?
Well, you're going too fast, but you got to make sure where you're apexing. So the apex point is way, way around this corner. In fact, let's do this. Let's go.
Yeah, so if I try to do that, I'm just like
in
the grass. I must be going too fast.
Woo. Okay. There's my car, right? As best as I can show it. Okay, so look where I'm apexing this car. I'm going to be apexing like way over here. Like I want to say 2/3 of the way through the corner. So still have an apex, 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 still have an apex. There's the apex point. Look how far around this corner I'm apexing. So I am basically driving. I'm accelerating at this point. You may be accelerating here and apexing here, and if that's the case, you're absolutely going to run wide. The later you can apex this, the better to be able to do it. So the apex point is like right in the compression, right at the lowest point of the corner where the camber is the most. That's the apex point at the corner. You can get up on the curbing, but again, it's going to just kind of unsettle the car. It's going to kind of prevent you from getting on full throttle. You're going to have to be very careful with getting too much oversteer and entering traction control. If you stay off the curbing, the car, all 4 contact patches of the car are really well planted, and you can get on throttle sooner and ride it through. So,
okay. Thank you for that.
Yep. This wide right-hander, this wide left-hander it's kind of single file. If you're too wide going through here, you are losing time to the field. Much like turn 3, like we discussed before. Better to get a really good line coming through here and giving up the spot than trying to fight it and run too wide. Cars are very on edge. It's hard to hold too wide through there. This last corner, and so I'm going to say something that may be controversial, do not pass coming through this last corner. It makes no sense as the attacking car to try to pass somebody here. It's the most important corner on the track. You need to have a good run coming out of it because that run carries all the way down the front straight. If you are compromised coming through this corner, you are compromised all the way down the front straight, and that is a long time under full throttle that you're losing time to the field. You may say, well, it's a heavy braking zone. There's ample opportunity to be able to get alongside somebody and take a tighter line and get the pass done. Yes, fine. But that gives the car that you just passed an entire straightaway, the longest straightaway, to draft off of you and then catch up to you and try to make a pass going into turn 1. Much better staying behind the car, focusing on getting a really good run coming out of this corner and passing them on a straight line with the help of their draft than fighting them, diving them on this corner, compromising your line and making you slow relative to the field. And you may still get past going into turn 1 because you gave them the draft. So don't pass into the last corner unless it's really like you have no option. Like this person is a lap car, for instance. Just delay the pass until after. So yeah, that's the passing zones here. Any questions? Nope. Okay. So like always, there should be servers that are open for people to jump into and enjoy and practice what we have preached. If I think, and I always forget, so I apologize, but I think one of the zone groups, it might be zone group 1, tends to have set up a server that does multiple race starts, for instance, like 10-minute race starts, something like that, where you can really focus and practice getting a good start and with traffic, and then it'll reset and do another, practice 10-minute race. If you jump into one of those, don't treat it like it's a 10-minute race and you need to make up all your spots. Treat it as a 1-hour race, but you're only doing the first 10 minutes of it, right? So don't make unreasonable attempts because in your mind it's a 10-minute race and I got to make all these places up now. No, focus on treating it like a true race start. Practice how you are going to race, and you'll get more out of it. For Leaf and a couple of other people, I think Leaf normally puts up the servers for practice races. Those will be basically like a dress rehearsal for the race itself. So they tend to be 30 minutes of practice, similar qualifying conditions as the race itself, and then it'll be an hour-long race. So if you want to practice strategy or basically run a dress rehearsal of what the race will feel like, you can jump into one of those. So you're free to join whichever one you want or whatever you want, or if you want to set up your own, you can do that as well. But have fun with it. Enjoy Interlagos. It's a good combo. I wish I was racing this weekend, but I am racing this weekend, or this week. I am racing this weekend, but it's in real life. I'll be at Road America. So silly plug, if you are in the Road America, if you're in Wisconsin, Chicagoland area, or anything around there, and you got nothing to do this weekend, come on up to Road America. Leif Peterson and I and Billy Smith will all be there. We're all PCA sim racing nerds, and we'd love to meet you. And you can come up. It's a free event. We'll be there racing from Friday all the way through Sunday, and you can come hang out with us. But other than that, have fun, enjoy the races these next 2 weeks, and we will have the next classroom in a fortnight, in 2 weeks. So I'll stick around if anybody has any questions, and you can feel free to ask.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. That's good stuff.